primer on Cartomancy, and which yeah, I'd given it before, and some of you were here from the last time I gave it. So you've got kind of a feeling for how to do it, but thanks for joining. Um, so with Cartomancy, there are really like two different kinds of card sets, which are Oracle cards and Tarot cards. I've got examples of both with me. So with Oracle cards, they're smaller decks. Um, tarot cards are about 78 cards, consisting of major arcana and minor arcana. Um, Oracle cards are typically fewer. So right here is my success cards deck. And the success cards deck is, I think, 64 cards, and this one is based off of the I Ching. Um, Other ones that I have the Green Oracle, which I rarely ever use, but it's got significantly fewer, as you can see here. Um, but it's all really kind of straightforward. Oracle cards tend to be very straightforward and just have like things listed like me. All right, so or yeah, there we go. Me. Um, or like the life cycle. Um, and so when you're reading or when you're doing cartomancy, they have what are called spreads typically. Some people will just do one card pulls in order to answer a question. So like say um with this deck, if I were to ask the question like what should I pay attention to? Or like if I wake up in the morning, I would ask like, what should I pay attention to today? What's going to be the thing that I need to, focus my shit on? And I pull it, okay, food. All right. So that could be like I need to pay attention to like my diet or something like that, or like where I'm going to go eat, or like if I'm having dinner with someone, that would be um, what I would focus on. However, there are also spreads, and one spread that I like to do with the success cards, which is the Oracle deck that I tend to use more often because it has it's very no nonsense and has worked very well for me. Um, what the the three card spread that I typically do with this one um, follows the pattern of I actually got it from the booklet from the Green Oracle, which is one thing that or a lot of people when they buy a tarot deck, they just completely disregard the booklet that comes with it. But honestly, you should at least read through it and pay attention to it, because the person who designed the book or the person who designed the cards like also wrote the book, and so they go hand in hand with one another. And sometimes with a specific deck, it will have specific interpretations of cards or ideas that are floated around in the card. um but the spread that I use for this deck comes from the Green Oracle one, and let's see, with the three cards. The first one is let's see, how do you approach the situation? The second card is what you should change, and then the third is what you should hold dear. So let's see. So with this, does anyone have a question that they would like to have asked in regards to this? You can either jump on the chat or send me a DM or something. Um, and
Will
I
you
can.
do
Yeah, go ahead.
will you read like how can we best like how can we make this ritual that we're gonna do tonight most effective?
Okay. Yeah, that works. So, how to make this ritual most effective? So how you should approach the situation is with this only experience. So with how I'm reading this is you should approach the you should approach the ritual itself with by focusing on the experience. Focus on the now, focus on what you're doing during the ritual. Don't necessarily focus on what other people are doing. Just focus on the experience itself and like everything that's going on in that. So the next card was I keep forgetting this. So the next thing is what you should change about your approach, which would be the goal in life is the card that came up next. So how or the goal of life, how I would approach this is or how I read this is saying that you might want to tweak your goal or your statement of intent just a little bit more. It might be a little too vague. Um, but what you it might not be like one thing, just go over what the statement is, what the purpose of the ritual is, and make sure that it's exactly what you need. And then the last one is how you should or what you should hold dear. So what you should absolutely like be embracing when performing this ritual. And this came up with you are unique. So what you should embrace with this ritual is the uniqueness of the situation and the ritual itself. So with all of these together, you should focus on how on the intricacy of the ritual, focus on how unique it is, how like the individual like quirks and idiosyncrasies of the ritual, and make sure that the goal itself is finely tuned. So yeah, that's oracle cards. There you typically don't do really large spreads with oracle cards because they're kind of straightforward, and with each of the cards are very often having very specific goals. If you start throwing out all sorts of cards with oracle cards, it tends to kind of muddy the waters and it makes interpretation for them a lot more difficult. Um, but then moving on with tarot cards, tarot cards they're a bit more nuanced, which allows for larger spreads. And so with tarot cards, god damn it. Okay. So with tarot cards, you have what by reading them, I suggest or so the way I read or do cartomancy is based on intuition. It's intuitive reading. I very, very rarely incorporate the like traditional meanings of cards, and so with people wanting to learn more and people just starting off with reading tarot cards, um, it's not it's not necessary to memorize everything that is in the book. It is not necessary to memorize what the cards are, which is what intimidates people a lot about tarot cards and tarot reading. You don't have to have those things memorized. What you need to do is focus on the image of the card. You need to, and so that's why a lot or like everyone on our server and everyone who's familiar with this and myself will recommend when you're getting a new deck to find a find a deck that resonates with you, find one that you like the artwork, it makes sense to you. So like here's the Thoth deck. If this is the kind of artwork that resonates with you, if this makes sense to you, if you can draw meaning out of these things, that's great, then go with this. If you can't, then don't. Um because the it's important for you to be able to do that, because what you're doing with reading tarot cards and doing a tarot spread is you are building a story. So let's see. Yeah, well, if anyone would like to volunteer, I'll give them a I'll give them an 8 card reading, which is the same one I did last time with Miguel here. But if anyone else would like to volunteer, I can give them a reading. Any figures? All right. So I'll just do myself. And so I've got 4 tarot decks. I'll go with the Dali one because I haven't read from that in a while. Um, so this is the Salvador Dali tarot deck. I kind of like the artwork, but honestly, he just kind of fucking phoned it in with the artwork on the cards. Um, he didn't really incorporate much traditional meaning behind those cards, which is fine and allows for a lot better intuitive work. But yeah, okay, so I'll give my 8 card reading, which is what I should be focusing on. What is the one thing in my life that I should be paying attention to? And okay. So the first card is going to describe that situation as to what I should be focusing on. And what I'll do is, as I'm reading this, I will give you how I interpret these cards, which is going to, and like how I break it down and everything. Um, which is going to be interesting because I've only read from this deck like a couple of times. So I'm not actually all that familiar with this deck, which will and should help people who just started and are getting their own. So what I should be focusing on is struggle. Um, so how I'm getting this is I see people struggling in this one. It looks to me as though there's a fight breaking out. It looks as though, you know, people are people are fighting for a specific thing. And um you also have the swords that are poking inwards, which to me indicate, even further battle. Um and so yeah, it looks this looks like, yeah, especially the fact that I'm pretty sure this is the assassination of Caesar. So what I should be focusing on is there's a struggle, there is a fight, and right now I feel as though there are things coming against me. Um so the next card is going to be what are unknown influences that are affecting my present, which here we have the Page of Wands, which things that are unknown to me that are affecting my present situation is, to me, this card kind of represents a wandering. So I feel as though I'm not what's unknown to me is the fact that this conflict in particular, I've just kind of wandered into it. And I haven't really given this, because I've just kind of wandered into it. I haven't gotten I haven't taken the conflict itself all that seriously, because I just kind of ambled my way into it. And the reason I'm saying this is because this, or why this represents wandering, is because you've got this guy, who's just he's got his wand walking stick, and he's just, to me it looks as though he's just kind of ambling into a scenario that he's not entirely sure of. His face looks kind of inquisitive to me. And so, in representation to this, or in relation to this last card and the conflict, um, as I had said, you're building a story, and so each card will relate to all of the other ones and help devise that story. And so, with tarot cards, you're each card is going to build and provide more information than the last card and help you like build this story up. And so, I have myself, which is wander or in a conflict, but as I'm wandering, it's not a conflict that I particularly saw coming, or because I'm wandering aimlessly, I'm not giving it as much attention as it would deserve. And so the next card represents what are known influences that are affecting this situation. And known things that are affecting me is the world, which, so these last two are minor arcana, and the minor arcana typically represent smaller influences or things that can be easily changed. um this big one, or this other one, is a major arcana, and it represents really like bigger things that are harder to be changed. And so, with this one, how I'm getting this, so known influences that are affecting my present, I have the world. And to me, this is showing a so things that are known to me that are affecting this is that I feel as though I am um I am bound to a greater thing. I am bound to something something that is something that is taking more of my attention, which also plays into the wandering card, because I had wandered myself into this situation and I'm not giving it the attention that it deserves. But with this, I feel bound to something that is bigger than me and that is taking my full attention. And the reason I say this is, on the card you have this really big image, this big sad crying face, but from it are these smaller figures which have these chains going from their necks and tying up to whatever the fuck this picture is. So to me, this is saying, like, I know that I have been giving more attention to this thing than I have been to this conflict. Um, so the next card represents what action I would take if I had never received this reading. And so here's another minor arcana. And without so what I would have done had I not received this reading is, okay, to me, I see two people there who are like having a good time. They're smiling. Up here, you have these cups that have, what looks like liquid pouring into them, and there's food. So to me, this card shows like a party. Um, with Given the fact that I had not been paying much attention, or paying the attention that I deserved to this conflict, and had been, bound to a bigger thing, what this card is telling me that if I had never received this reading, what I would be doing instead is focusing more on like good times, more like, just kind of going with what I want to do instead of focusing on this conflict, focusing on something like attacking me or whatever. I would just be focusing on simple pleasures like, food and then drinks and having a good time and laughing and doing whatever the hell I want. Now, the next card represents what I actually should do, what the ideal situation would be. And so here is another major arcana, which is the Empress. And so with the Empress, looking at this card, it's telling me that so just looking at the image, how I'm seeing this is she seems like a pretty stern woman. And she's rising up out of what appears to be water. And so how I intuitively read that is like there's a situation that she deems very important, and she's coming up out of the water in order to tell me. And so yeah, she actually, like, looking closer to face, she looks pretty pissed. So I'm going to read this as like the ideal situation, and what I should do is I need to actually like recognize this conflict, give it the attention that it deserves, stop focusing on this big thing that I have been focusing on, and stop, focusing on my own pleasure and what I want to do and all of that shit, and realize that what I need to do is actually work. And like, she seems really pissed, and I need to do this and pay attention to what I need to, which is this conflict. This is what I have to be focusing on, not what I want to do, but understand this is what I have to do, and I need to do it because otherwise she's going to beat me with that scepter. So the next card is what the outcome would be if I were to follow the initial reaction. So if I were to have go focus on what I want to, this is what would happen, and that is not good. If I were to just focus um, on my own food and drink and partying and whatever, um, that's a man who's laying on his deathbed, and it looks like there's an angel watching over him, and his soul is fucking escaping his body or some shit, and he's got a bunch of swords that are gonna stab him. So if I were to continue on this path of pleasure rather than focusing on the conflict that I need to be, I'm gonna fucking die and get stabbed by this angel with these floating swords, and that is not. Although, like, he is kind of laying on a cake, I guess, or something. Whatever. It's not a good time. I'm not gonna be having a good time, and nothing good will happen if I just keep like apart from just, oh yeah, having a drink and getting getting a good party going on. Like, nothing good's going to happen in the long run. So the next card is what the outcome will be should I follow the ideal action and not getting beaten by the Empress with her scepter, which is I don't know. So from this image, I'm getting so it's a dude riding on a horse, and he's like conquering, he's kicking ass. Like, you've got this figure over here, like, kind of venerating horseman, who's just walking around with this stick and ready to kick some ass. He looks like he's kind of, you know, ruling over things. And so to me, I get that if I were to follow the ideal action, like, yeah, I would be able to take a place of, you know, conquering or whatever, and I'd be able to say, like, yeah, this is, I've earned this place. Like, i can I can ride around on my horse and do whatever the hell I want because it's my horse and my sticks, and I can fucking take my horse and step all over this little, purple man. So how I'm reading this, if I avoid getting pummeled by the scepter of the Empress, I will achieve things, and I will be in a place of like glory, and like great awesome things will happen, as opposed to just partying over here and then getting stabbed with a bunch of swords. And so yeah, I want to follow that ideal action and get some glory. But then the last card represents, in the long run, does this situation even fucking matter? So like 5 years down the road, am I going to look at this situation and be like, no, I don't even remember this happening? And I've got the Knight of Swords. And so how I'm reading this is, no, it's not going to matter a whole lot. The reason why is because you've got like this pedestal here, and yeah, there's a horseman, and he's got his sword and everything, but yeah, he's kind of on a tiny pedestal. And so ultimately, like, and then there's a butterfly, and it's not, that butterfly's um not very, or that butterfly is pretty big in comparison with him. So like that makes me think that this horse and this knight is actually pretty tiny. And I mean, he's on a kind of pedestal, and so like any glory that I receive from this card, like it's gonna be pretty small. So I'll look back and just be like, oh yeah, that was a good time. Yeah, I got some, like, yeah, I found $20 in my pocket. It was cool. But uh, like not much more came of it out of that. So in the long run, I don't think this conflict is a really big thing. But yeah, I should probably not, or actually pay attention to it and deal with the conflict rather than, just ignoring it by having a party or whatever. But in the long run, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. So yeah, that's the story that had kind of unfolded itself from these cards, and they do interplay a lot. They do kind of tie in and everything. And you can also draw other correlations the more you get with things. So you've got the conflict, which is swords, and you've got the outcome, which is more swords, and then the final does it even matter card is swords again. So those kind of interplay. You also have the wands that kind of tie in together. So I've just been wandering into things and not paying attention, but over here, yeah, I become like king of the sticks. So like you can, as you're reading things, you can tie them all in together and figure out, like other small nuances and meanings. But I just read it entirely intuitively. So it's what I'm interpreting from the cards, what the cards are telling me, and how those interplay, and the story that I build around that. And you'll do that with any other deck, and you'll find, so if I were to take the Thoth deck over here, for example, and just ask, you can do simple one card pulls from thing, or from a tarot deck, even though it's a lot more nuanced. So like, am after this primer thing, am I going to have a good snack? And so I've got the Fool. And so what this is telling me is like, no, don't. You're just kind of avoiding things right now, and you don't need to go have a snack. What you should be doing is like not avoiding things by having a snack. So don't don't be a dumbass. Go actually do some work, and stop. Don't go and eat those nachos. So I guess I'm not going to go eat nachos after this. Um, yeah. So though that's pretty much a really easy breakdown on how to read tarot cards and doing cartomancy. You just kind of follow it intuitively. Like you go with what your first initial response is, and how you read the card that goes out. And if you're doing larger spreads, and there are lots of different kinds of spreads. There's like one of the more popular ones is the 10 card Celtic Cross. I don't really do that one that all that often because it just doesn't really appeal to me. um But yeah, there's lots of different spreads, lots of different ways you can do things. And yeah, you have to get a feel for the deck and find out you know what each card means to you, and start laying out in a journal, like, and which I'll do. I'll write down this experience that I had and what I did, and I will find, or I'll try and pinpoint what exactly that conflict was and how I dealt with it and all of that things. And then later on I will come back to that and see if I had done, or if I had described it correctly. And that's one thing that you'll want to do with when you're starting off with tarot and whatever, so especially if you get a new deck, because they're new cards to you and you're not quite sure how to interpret them apart from your own intuition. And so you'll want to have everything journaled to make sure that you're actually interpreting these things correctly, and it makes sense, and it's not, or you're not putting too much thought into it. You're just kind of going with um how your intuition is guiding you, because ultimately it's your intuition that is the driving force behind all of this. um and so yeah, if you're practicing with yourself, just yeah, write everything down and make sure that you're interpreting it correctly. And you can always come back later, and if you don't think that you interpreted it correctly, look at that card again, and try and like find, like, how could I have interpreted this in such a way that it would have made this situation make more sense. Like, go back to the card and look at it and be like, well, what did I miss? I must have missed something. And so look at that card, find out what you missed, and go from there. But you're constantly using tarot cards as a means by which to sharpen your own intuition. So yeah, there's my primer, really, unless anyone had any questions that they would like answered.
Oh, there we go. I had a quick question.
Yeah, shoot.
So you were talking about like multiple different spreads, and I see a lot of different orientations, like spreads where this will represent conscious and this will represent unconscious.
Yeah.
What factors do people use to determine that, or why one spread would be more effective for a particular question than another?
Okay, so yeah, the different spreads would factor in different things, and like the reason why you would do that is because it's typically suited to the question, or the question at hand. Like, if someone comes asking for a particular question, so like with the 3 card spread that I had thrown out, that one I really like, because it's very quick, it answers the question relatively quickly. But the spread that I had just done with the tarot cards, yeah, that one is more nebulous, and that one's like, well, I need a tarot card reading, but I don't know what for. So if I could have that or so I would do that one instead, as like what you should be focusing on. There are other cards that you can or other spreads that I do. Really, it's only one other one, and those 3 together kind of act as my all-purpose spreads, because they kind of are able to answer any question whatsoever. And the other one I do, it has 4 cards, with 1 card being, and or it's what the thesis is, so what the situation is, like if you have a particular question, this is the card that is the answer to it. The first card is the thesis. So if you ask a question, this is what the answer to that question is. And then the next card would be the antithesis. And so, in relation to your question, what is working against you in that situation? The next card would be synthesis. And the synthesis is how you reconcile what the answer you got from the first question was with what is working against you, and how you combine those. And then the fourth card would be the outcome. And so out of this, what's the outcome of the situation going to be? So when it comes to spreads in general, like you'll just want to find one that answers all of it. It's suited towards the question that you want and the reason why you're reading a tarot spread. So if um if you want to do like a 10 card one and that gives you all of the answers that you want behind it and it covers like all of the bases, then go with that one. If you want to do a spread that just gives you really concise answers and doesn't really go into detail because you don't think you really needed a whole lot, then just jump onto that one. So it's really like finding the spread. It's just like finding the deck. Find a spread that works for you and the one that you're comfortable with and that answers all of the questions that you want answered. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question in a sense. I guess in a way, I'm trying to make it a little more technical than it is. So that's a gap I'll have to get over, but that's very helpful.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I it's just find the spread that works for you. And find one that you're comfortable with and one that answers all of the questions that you want answered. So like with the one that you would mention, like how your unconscious deals with something versus how your consciousness deals with something. If those are the kind of answers you want or the kinds of questions you want answered for something, then yeah, go with that one. But otherwise, like that's kind of like with the 8 card spread I just did. I devised that on my own because that answered all of the questions that I wanted answered in the read at the time, and so I just stuck with that. And I continue to give out that one because it answers a lot of other questions that other people have regarding things. So that's one of the ones that I primarily do. But I used to, before I devised that, I really only did like 3 card spreads, because those ones were just easy to memorize, or and so I didn't have to put a whole lot of thought into like, oh shit, what's the 5th card again? What does that one mean? But yeah, so like when you're doing your own reading, just find what works for you and find out what answers you want or what questions you want answered. I mean, hell, devise your own spread. Like what in when it comes to like a question in your life, if you have a particular question that you want answered, devise your own spread so that that way you can attack that situation or that you can attack that question and provide as many answers as you want for that situation. So, yeah, find your own card or find a deck that that speaks to you. And if going through all of these different spreads, if none of them answer the questions that you want, or they kind of seem like, well, that one's irrelevant and I don't really care what that one means, then don't use it. Find or kind of create your own reading around it. Does anyone have any other questions? All right. Well, it seems like we're good then. So hopefully that kind of quick primers helped everybody out, and you can, feel comfortable giving your own readings and start if you haven't already started doing a cartomancy or, you know, tarot reading or oracle deck. And yeah, like if you're still at this point intimidated by a tarot deck, just go with an oracle deck. Those ones are simple. It's like some of them are like with the green oracle one, that one was like, I don't know, like 20 cards or something, and it's just like really straightforward. And so sustainability, fall, coexist, education, the life cycle, light, stones, like it just really simple things. If and there's not much interpretation that's needed behind most of these. So if you're still intimidated by tarot after that with its 78 cards, go with an oracle deck. Like you do what you want. Find out what works for you, and then you can move up to a tarot deck if that's what you want to do. But I just find tarot to be a lot more nuanced, and because it's more nuanced, it allows for it allows for kind of a more in-depth interpretation behind things, because like I said, with the Oracle deck, it does smaller spreads because the more cards you just throw into there, it kind of muddies the water for it. But yeah, so I guess unless anyone has any other questions, thanks for joining me, and I hope that's helped you with your own divination practice.
Yeah.
Oh
No,
yeah,
that
dude. Thanks
sounds
so much
good,
for doing
and
this.
was really
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
Glad to be a help. Yep, yep. Thanks for recording this, Hephaestus. So yeah, I guess I'm going to go do something that's not fucking eating the nachos that I wanted to go eat. I'm gonna go do something less nacho related.